Ah, yes, Lithuania. A country with rich history. That mostly inhabited by Caprini and Ilafia. Famous for their study in Originium arts and music. And one can say music is inseparable from Lithuanian. You see, in Lithuania, music has widespread applications in the Originium arts. This merging between music and Originium arts is called musical arts. We don't have to go full logic here. But basically someone can use music to channel their arts. In fact, Lithuanians' top casters are almost without exception great musicians. And when talking about caster and musician, we can't ignore the greatest caster that Terra ever witnessed, and former ruler of Lithuania, the Witch King. The Witch King was once a simple nobleman from the city of Utica, and was chosen by the Prince Electors to become the Lithuanian monarch. He was a man of great political sagacity and extensive knowledge of Originium arts. In his early decade ruling the country, he was a genuine ruler that bring prosperity to Lithuania, and his knowledge of Originium arts eventually made him the most powerful caster in Terra. However, in later years, following his further study and experiment on Originium arts, his policies took a dramatic turn. He began to reign terror over the country, to pursue the peak of Originium arts. Some of his notorious actions were he massacred a whole town for an experiment, turning the emissaries from the Empire of Gaul into living statues. And using infected for experiment became a custom during his reign. Because of his actions and power, he eventually earned the Witch King title. And after more than 60 years of his rule, in a war dubbed the Battle of the Four Emperors, Lithuania with its allies managed to annihilate the Gaulish Empire from existence. And even after winning the war and obtaining new territory, the Witch King still reigns terror over his own country. Tired of his oppression, some people of Lithuania began an uprising. They began to search far and wide for any ancient scroll, to unearth the source of his power and the means to defeat him. And eventually, two heroines with the support of Lithuanian prince electors managed to defeat the Witch King around the year 1078. They beheaded him, cut his twisted horn, and his body was displayed for all the Lithuanian to see. These two heroines will then become the new ruler of Lithuania, and are titled the Twin Empresses. One is called the White or Golden Empress, while the other one is called the Black Empress. After they ascended to the throne, life in Lithuania became more peaceful, especially for the infected. The empresses order the people to treat the infected with dignity. Several infected districts were built in a major nomadic city, where the infected can live a relatively peaceful life, although they are still pretty much neglected by the government. The twin empresses also didn't stop, until they make sure everything related to the Witch King is destroyed. This includes his arts research, music, and that also includes his bloodline, to make sure none will ever succeed him. While it seems the Witch King is the big meanie in the story, but not everyone is happy with the twin empresses. They are implied to have some shady background and goal. Some Witch King's loyalist, the remnants, or the remains, are trying everything they can to overthrow the twin empresses. To them, the Witch King was the legitimate ruler of Lithuania, and losing the symbol of power is probably not a good thing to them. After all, the king has his fair share in preventing Lithuania from being annihilated. Some worshipped his political capital, while some are by his tremendous power. But all have the same goal, to overthrow the twin empresses. And to this day, the loyalists are still active and quite big in number. Okay, moving to the story. The game didn't give the exact date of this event, but the event started roughly 20 years after the Witch King's death, and after near-light event in November 1097. So this event should occur in the year 1098 or above. We see the now matured Hibiscus in the nomadic city of Vizsheim, Lithuania. She's now a formal doctor in Rhodes Island, even becoming an attending physician, and has become a more gentle person than before, although her cooking skill is still questionable. Hibiscus is currently in the Afterglow district, the infected district of Vizsheim. to investigate this abnormal recovery happening around the district. There have been several people who are seriously ill from oropathy some time ago. But recently their condition has significantly become better. In ordinary people's eyes this is a miracle. But for a doctor, this is certainly not normal. Then Hibiscus meets Andante, the head and the only member of the Vizirheim branch office. Andante was told that Hibiscus overworked herself to investigate the phenomenon. So Andante tells Hibiscus to relax for a day. Especially because today is William Czerny's farewell concert. A famed Lithuanian musician and an infected. Who has been ill for half a year, but is now in a better shape to perform. Then both of them arrived at the Afterglow Hall. A concert hall with a very unique design like a giant instrument. The place is so crowded, half of the district is here to listen to Czerny's music. Czerny then makes an appearance and presents a few songs to the crowd. After that, he announces that he welcomes anyone to perform in his upcoming concert next week. Whether you are an amateur musician or an ordinary coffee shop owner, you are all welcome to perform. Well, as long as you pass the selection though. Sometime later, in one of a not very good looking house in the district, we see a young man named Kaida and his sickly grandpa. They're wanderers who recently arrived in the city. Kaida was told there is prize money if he enters Czerny's concert. And he certainly could use the money to treat his granda. Although his grandpa is against it. But he still goes to apply for the concert by showing his cello skill. Meanwhile, we see a young noble, and the ruler of Vizirheim city. Miss Gertrude Strollo. She invited this young noble from the city of Utica to enjoy a breath of fresh air and apply to Czerny's concert. The young noble is certain there is an ulterior motive, but he agrees to apply for the concert. Then back to Afterglow Hall, there are so many people lining up for the application. Hibiscus and Andante are also here, but just to watch, so they go straight inside. Then we see Kaida. The queue is so long so he asks the person in charge if he can go first. Because he can't leave his sickly grandpa for long. The person politely refuses, saying it is against the rules. But then the noble from before walks in. A non-infected and also a noble wanted to apply for this concert sure is surprising. The noble then asks if he and Kaida can enter first. The lady can't refuse the noble request, so she lets them in. Inside, Kaida is ready to perform with his cello. But he learns that there's no payment for playing in Czerny's concert. He is disappointed, but still presented a song since he's already here. In the middle of his performance, the young noble joins in with his flute. They pass the applications, and the staff thinks they should apply as an ensemble in tomorrow's selection. Kaida is hesitant because he's here for the money. But the noble who wishes to be called Ebenholz is willing to pay for his grandpa's treatment if he agrees to an ensemble with him. Kaida was delighted to hear that, and agreed to play with Eben. And then the staff arranged them to play Morgen und Abend, a flute and cello duet with piano accompaniment, and Czerny's signature work. Meanwhile, Hibiscus, who heard about Kaida's grandpa, wanted to take him to the office for an examination. And tomorrow's morning, the grandpa was brought to the branch office for an examination. His condition is certainly not good, and is advised to be hospitalized. But grandpa said he doesn't want to burden Kaida. And this hospital that partnered with Rhodes Island hardly care about their infected patients, and he doesn't like them for that. Hibiscus then suggests grandpa be treated here instead. She'll be able to monitor his health closely and investigate the phenomenon. After everything has been settled, Kaida goes to see Eben for the selection. In this selection phase, Czerny will personally judge their performance. And not so surprisingly, Czerny find their performance lacking. Eben with his pride, and Czerny with his temper makes them end up in an argument. But then Eben and Kaida leaves. Outside, Kaida says Eben should apologize to Czerny, as he might let them perform again. After all, they didn't have any practice for this selection. But Eben's pride makes him refuse to apologize. and goes back to Gertrude's residence to consider what he should do. On his way back he got a painful headache, and it seems someone is talking from inside his head. Then in Gertrude's house, it's revealed that Gertrude is the biggest sponsor of Czerny's concert, and managed to convince Czerny to work things out, so Kaida and Aben will become a backup for Morgan and Abend. Gertrude also reveals there's indeed an ulterior motive of her invitation. So, this headache that Ebenholz experienced before is called the Voice of Terror, the result of the painful experiment that happened to him years ago, done by the Witch King's loyalist, and it's believed a fragment of the king's consciousness is inside his head. Because of this, he's been under the Twin Empress's surveillance ever since. Not just because of the experiment, but because he is also the distant relative of the Witch King. The Twin Empresses let him live and become the Count of Vertica, but he's pretty much a prisoner there. He rarely or even never comes out from his spire. So Ebenholz always yearning for a freedom. Gertrude says she can give him a freedom, and also remove the Voice of Terror from him. And she reveals that Kaida also has the Voice of Terror. She simply needs Aben and Kaida to perform together in the Afterglow Hall. And then Gertrude will transfer Aben's Voice of Terror to Kaida. Afterward, they will fake Aben's death, and Aben will gain his freedom. In exchange, she will use Aben's death to her advantage. And this transfer can only be completed if they perform in the Afterglow Hall, which was initially a fortress of arts built by the Witch King. Ebenholz said he understands and then leave. And after Ebenholz leave, Gertrude received a mysterious call, telling her that Rhodes Island are interrupting their plan, and Gertrude should find a way to drive them off from the city. The next day, Kaida and Aben are inside Czerny's house. Czerny said that they will become the primary candidates for Morgan and Abend, because the two who were to perform got into a bar accident. Czerny is someone who doesn't like the noble, and considering how things yesterday, he suspects Aben for this accident. But Kaida defend Aben from the accusation, which then Czerny chooses to believe Kaida and both may perform. He also gives Kaida his cello, since Kaida doesn't have one. Then Hibiscus comes in to visit Czerny. She explains there's an abnormal recovery case around the district, and she would like to check on Czerny's condition and ask for his help. Then an elderly woman named Ursula comes in. She is Czerny's distant relative who has been taking care of him for a long time. Ursula's presence makes the air more comfortable. But soon everyone leaves as Czerny is busy, and the two must rehearse. Outside, Aben asks if he can stay at Kaida's house for a few days. Besides, they can rehearse in Kaida's house. Kaida agrees and then both of them go there. Aben is quite surprised with the house's condition. Nevertheless, they both work to master their performance. Shifting to Gertrude. To drive the Rhodes Islander away, she's making a fake prophecy, and tells her underlings to spread it only in Afterglow. Sometime later, because of the first verse in the prophecy, some people begin to dislike Hibiscus, who they believe is the Sarkaz, or the fiend in the prophecy. To make matter worse, an agitator named Glaman accuses Hibiscus for working with the Witch King loyalist, after she mindlessly say the Witch King, which has become a forbidden word to speak. Luckily, Kaida and Aben save her from getting mobbed, but Kaida's cello got blasted in the commotion. Next day, Ebenholz takes Kaida outside of the Afterglow district to buy a cello. Kaida is hesitant because he didn't apply to go out of the district first, and if they were found out, Aben might receive a bigger punishment. But he assures Kaida everything is fine. Then both enter a music instrument shop. But the store clerk forbade Kaida to enter, because his clothes don't look noble enough. Ebenholz argues with the clerk and says that Kaida will enter one way or another. The clerk eventually apologizes and let Kaida enter the shop. Now after buying a new cello, they go to see a tailor to order a suit. Along the way, Aben asks where Kaida learned how to play cello. Kaida says that he once had a teacher who even gave him a cello. She was a nice sancta with very long hair that always had a smile on her face. And although the cello that he received from her is pretty much destroyed, but he still keeps the bow as a keepsake. And since Kaida probably will leave Afterglow once the concert ended, he plans to get some keepsakes from his friends here. On the other side, despite what happened earlier, Hibiscus still determined to investigate the strange phenomenon. She stumbled upon a rude infected once again. But this time, a barista named Beagle helps her out and invite her to drink a coffee and discuss the strange happenings in the city. Then shifting to Gertrude chatting with her underling. Some things are revealed here. First, Laman was ordered to stir up the crowd and spread the false prophecy. It's also revealed that Cherny has sacrificed quite a lot for his concert, like giving some of the copyrights of his songs to invite critics to the concert. And lastly, she was informed there was a sancta who entered the city. It seems Gertrude knows who she is and might interfere in her plan. But according to her underlings, she has already left Vizarheim. So with that, Gertrude tells her men to prepare the Afterglow hall for her plan. Tomorrow morning, Hibiscus came knocking at Kaida's house. Based on her and Andante's analysis, the infected in Afterglow suffered something called false recovery. Their bodies seem to be healthy from the outside, but inside, their undamaged body part overworked to cover the damaged body part. And soon enough their oropathy condition will enter a life-threatening condition. And Cherny is also one of them. But the most surprising thing is that Hibiscus suspects Sabin and Kaida to be the primary factors behind this occurrence. Because the people that live near Kaida house are the first to show the symptoms of this phenomenon. They, or whatever they're carrying, might be the source of this false recovery. Then Hibiscus takes Sabin outside to speak privately with him. Rhodes Island knew this false recovery started ever since Kaida entered the city. Based on Andante's reports, the situation would have taken at least half a year to deteriorate to its current state with just Kaida alone. But somehow after Aben arrived, people's health deteriorate even faster. And if this false recovery is caused by arts, their upcoming performance will only amplify the effect. So Hibiscus demands Aben leave the district or even the city immediately. Aben says he'll think about it and then leave. He goes to see Gertrude as she might know something. And boy, she knows everything. Unlike Aben's voice of terror, Kaida's voice is imperfect and damaged. Because of this, Kaida has been unconsciously casting arts to those around him and increasing the activity of originium inside someone's body. At first it enhances their compensatory functions and seemingly heals them. But soon enough it will endanger the life of the infected around Kaida and himself. Gertrude also says that Aben and Kaida performing together, indeed increasing the damage that Kaida's voice of terror inflicted. Didn't want to harm too many people, Aben refused to be part of Gertrude's plan. Aben then leaves Gertrude's residence and goes to the edge of the nomadic city. He's planning to jump off the platform and leave this city behind. But Gertrude catches up to him and persuades him to not jump. He might survive the fall, but he'll end up in a barren land with no chance of surviving. Gertrude also gives more detail about her plan. After Aben's voice had been transferred to Kaida, she will kill Kaida and disguise his body as Ebenholz. And then Ebenholz can fake his death and gain his freedom. Besides, Kaida has become the main victim of his own voice of terror. It's estimated he will only live for the next 2 weeks before experiencing a painful death. She saw this as an act of mercy towards Kaida, and Ebenholz will obtain the freedom that he always yearned. But Aben, stressed with the situations, he falls unconscious. Later, Aben wakes up inside Gertrude's house, but refuses to listen to anything that Gertrude says and goes back to Kaida. Once in his house, Aben collapses once again and is woken up by soothing melody coming from Kaida's cello. Aben feels familiar with the melody. Kaida says he doesn't exactly remember when or where he learned it, but he's sure someone hummed it to him when he was a kid. Ebenholz then realizes he once met Kaida way back before in Afterglow. And a flashback story starts here. Aben remembers the time when he became a test subject for the Loyalist. He and 14 other Witch King's remaining relatives were arrested to become a vessel of the Voice of Terror. The Loyalist knew this is an extremely difficult experiment. But if they succeed, they can use the vessel to become their de facto leader and use it as a bargaining chip to ask for other countries' aid. Among the test subject, there's Kaida, and a young woman who always take care of them both and teaches Kaida the song he always humming. After 2 years and numerous experiments, it's only Kaida and Ebenholz left. And Kaida volunteered to be experimented first to protect Aben. From the look of things, the Loyalist managed to put the Voice of Terror to Kaida. But it was imperfect, and Kaida seemingly died during the experiment. Then comes Ebenholz's turn. And this time the Voice of Terror was successfully planted in him. But the Loyalist plan soon failed, as the Empresses managed to sniff their position. And eventually the Empress's agent clears out the area and takes Ebenholz. Back to the present, after feeling better, Ebenholz goes outside to clear his head and thinks of what he should do. But he unexpectedly overhears Laman talking with a noble. He finds out that Laman has been spreading false prophecy and is currently tasked to do something in the sewer. Aben follows him, but since the sewer is not a good place for a noble, he stopped Laman before he enters. Before Aben can interrogate Laman, another weapon is pointed at Aben from his back. It was Bikla, surprisingly a spy for the Empress, who is also here to investigate Laman and his friends. Seeing Aben is distracted, Laman uses this chance to enter the sewer. Bikla believes Aben is in cahoot with Laman, but Aben more or less convinced him that he's not, and both of them go into the sewer. Shifting to Cherny's house, we see Hibiscus meeting with Cherny. Hibiscus explains the false recovery and demands him put the concert on hold, or at least cancel Kaida and Aben's performance. But without solid evidence that they are the source of this tragedy, Cherny refused to cooperate. Then Hibiscus seemingly said that Cherny doesn't care about the people of Afterglow, which angered Cherny, but Ursula managed to calm them down and ask Hibiscus to take a walk with her outside. They then go to the sauerkraut stall, whose owner gave Hibiscus a free sauerkraut once. But it was so unhealthy, she was actually on the verge of tears after just one bite. The stall owner then joins in their conversation. Ursula and the stall owner talks about Afterglow's history. Back in the day, when the Witch King still rules the country, there's no such thing as an infected district. The king ordered the construction of magnificent concert hall in Vizerheim. But if what Gertrude said is true, it was supposed to be some kind of arts fortress. The concert hall was named the Afterglow Hall. But after its construction, people barely use that place. And the Witch King turns his attention to something else. Gertrude's father, who ruled Vizerheim at the time, hated the concert hall. And probably after the twin empresses rise to power, there's a plan to build an infected district in the old industrial plate. Gertrude's father uses that chance to lump the hall with the industrial plate. And then the Afterglow district was born. During its early days, the district is full of chaos, and the authorities didn't care much about them. But some years later, young Cherny stepped in. He was a brilliant musician from a young age. But since he is an infected, he got no choice but to publish his work anonymously. And although the nobles do enjoy his song, they still won't recognize him. Until he wrote Morgan und Abend. Cherny once had a piano teacher, and he's a close friend of his teacher's daughter. But one day she passed away, which strike a heavy blow to Cherny. But he rise, and wrote Morgan und Abend dedicated to her. Around this time, Gertrude befriended him. She supports Cherny fully and helps spread Morgan und Abend. The song was so magnificent it makes the nobility have no other choice but to recognize Cherny and Afterglow district. But later it is said that Cherny doesn't like how Morgan und Abend became popular. It was dedicated to his dearest friend, and he doesn't want many people to know. But Gertrude made it into his selling point. and it's implied that while Gertrude recognized Czerny's talent, but she's always here for the profit and her own family glory. Ever since then, the two are no longer a friend, and their relationship is no more than a sponsor and a musician. But still, after Czerny's work became popular in the country, he began to cultivate the musical talent of the people in the district. One after another, the people began to use their musical knowledge to a good use. The money it brought in turned Afterglow for the better. And because of his work, Czerny is cherished by the people. Like every person, he has his flaw. But he without a doubt cares for the people in the district. Then not long after, Hibiscus got a call from Andante, telling her that Kaida's grandpa has gone missing. So then Hibiscus goes to search for him. Shifting to Aben and Bigla in the sewer, they managed to catch Laman and found some interesting stuff. Laman was here to make the third verse of the prophecy come true by releasing massive number of toxic originium slugs to the district. They also found a secret laboratory, and Bigla grabs every research notes he can get. On their way out, they can see from the sewer grate that the district has fallen into chaos, and the slugs are gathering at the direction where a cello can be heard. Aben realizes that is Kaida. So both Aben and Bigla join hands to clear the few remaining slugs, and goes to their separate way. Later, Aben manages to stop Kaida from sacrificing himself. He was planning to lure the slugs and then burn himself with them. Ever since he was little, Kaida knows there is something wrong with him. And with what Hibiscus said, he is certain he is the cause of this tragedy. Aben tells him this is not his fault, and then explains about the voice of terror, about Gertrude's plan, and about his past. Upon hearing the truth, Kaida is glad it's not something he is born with. But things are out of control now, he can no longer suppress his voice of terror. And if what Gertrude said is true, he only has a few days left to live. So what's the difference of ending his life now? But Ebenhol stops him from thinking about that. And he says that the voice of terror can be transferred or swapped. But first, they have to get rid of these slugs. So Aben tells Kaida to duet with him. Both of them then play the melody coming from the voice of terror. A massive number of slugs begin to gather around them, but soon retreat to the sewer as if they're seeing a dangerous predator. After their performance ended, they managed to drive away all the slugs. And soon Kaida fainted because he was poisoned by the slug. The next day, the district is no longer in chaos and everything goes back to normal. Hibiscus is in the Rhodes Island office, tending to Kaida's wound. And she learned everything from Aben. In order to help Kaida with the voice of terror, first they need proof that the voice is a real thing. They need physical evidence. Kaida's grandpa then comes in. He tells them that the voice of terror is a real thing. He seems to know a lot more for just an ordinary old man. But he said he didn't have the time to explain it now. And then suggest our protagonist to check on the Afterglow Hall Lounge, where Gertrude had prepared the place for her plan. Before that, they visit Czerny to ask him to join. He just got back from several hospitals outside of the district. There were a couple other people who got poisoned by the slugs. But all hospitals didn't care about the things happening in the district. And there are only 2 hospitals that agrees to admit patients from Afterglow. But Czerny had sacrificed a lot just for them to sign the contract. He put every copyright he holds in the distribution of his concert as collateral. After that, Aben and Hibiscus explain everything to Czerny. And then the 3 of them go to the concert hall to see the lounge. As expected, not just the lounge, but Arts Amplifier can be found anywhere in the concert hall. If Aben and Kaida were to perform with this many Arts Amplifier, the people of Afterglow will be massacred. Worst case scenario, after they die, their body will spread more originium particles. And the whole city will become uninfected. And that's going to be the end of Vizerheim. Suddenly, Gertrude walks in. Even though her plan just got found, she's not surprised at all. and confident that she can still convince Aben to work with her again. All she needs now is just to eliminate Czerny and Hibiscus. But Ebenholz decided to defend them and fight this old hag. They went outside, as fighting with arts inside the hall is not a wise thing to do. They give their all to beat the other. But eventually, Aben manages to beat her. Even though she lost, but she's still confident things will get the way she wanted. After all, she's the head of this city, she can make up any kind of excuse. Then Bigla comes in, but he didn't immediately support Aben either. As what he saw is that Aben and his gang break into the hall. And learned that Aben is also part of Gertrude's plan. But with the laboratory and notes they found yesterday, Gertrude is suspected to be working with the Loyalist to research the voice of terror. And with that, he takes Gertrude for interrogation. And tells Czerny that the hall will be clean from any arts amplifier. So the concert can still go as planned, and it's up to Czerny if he wants to cancel it. Back to the office. Hibiscus wanted to take Kaida to Rhodes Island landship for a better treatment. But all of them knew he won't make it in time. Besides, there's no way Rhodes Island can handle his voice of terror. Suddenly, Kaida Grandpa comes in, bringing the research copies about the voice of terror that he borrowed from Bigla. Czerny and Aben will see what they can learn from the research notes, while Hibiscus takes the Grandpa somewhere to rest. Grandpa tells Hibiscus about his story and Kaida. He was once an agent for the Empresses just like Bigla. That once hunts down the Loyalists who experiment on the voice of terror. But by the time they found them, they have already made Kaida and Aben the way they are now. And since the Witch King's research has become a taboo, and current Lithanian courtcaster didn't find any use in the voice of terror, they didn't bother to remove the voice from Aben and Kaida. But of course, there's still a threat. So even though Aben was spared by the Empress, he is under tight surveillance. As for Kaida, since his condition is not stable, death will be the best choice for him. But either because of the Empress's order, or solely from Grandpa's sympathy, Kaida managed to live until now. Meanwhile, Czerny and Aben learned that the voice of terror are the melodies that the Witch King left behind. That also contains a fragment of his consciousness. Czerny also found a way to drag the voices from their heads. First he will listen the boys' duet playing the melodies from their voice. Then create a new song containing some of that melody. And use the new song to become some sort of vessel for their voices. If anything else fails, Czerny himself is willing to become the new vessel. To create a song that can hold the Witch King's power, he endanger his own life. But Czerny manages to complete the new song in just one night. And he titled the song Licht, Unschatten. The next day, the day of the concert, Czerny decided to play his new song in the concert, replacing Morgan and Abend, and transferring the boys' voices at the same time during the concert. After several other performances, it's time for our trio to perform. At first there's nothing wrong with their performance. But when Czerny started to reel the boys' voices, trouble's starting to brew. Meanwhile, we see Gertrude and Bigla in a house near the hall. Gertrude reveals some surprising things to Bigla. First, they talk about Gertrude's father who was once sheltering the Loyalist, and one of the people who admired the king for his political capital. And during her father's era, the Strollo family is much more bigger and influential than they are now. But after the twin empresses' rise to power, her father, who was a staunch supporter of the Witch King, began to lose power and wealth. But at the end, he was about to snatch the Loyalist to the empresses. But the Loyalist silenced him before he can tell who pulls the string. Her elder brother then takes his place. But he can't endure the pressure from the Loyalist, who is still their backer. Seeing her brother was incompetent, Gertrude decided his free trial of living has ended. She then takes his place to rule the family in Visserheim. But Gertrude still has to answer to the Loyalist, and still fail to show value to them. But soon she found a way to restart the Voice of Terror program. Since it's a big discovery for the Loyalist, Gertrude earned their respect. But by the time she got their respect, she already had enough of them. so she decided to invite some of the big shot in the loyalists to the concert. And what they and our protagonist didn't know, they all have fallen into her trap. While the amplifiers are gone, but she has already remodeled the entire concert hall. So when Cherney reel in the boys' voices to anything except Witch King's bloodline, the voice will turn into some kind of void or a black hole, consuming the hall and the area around it. And since the beginning, Gertrude's goal was simply just revenge. By killing the whole concert audience, she wanted to show the loyalist and the empresses how it feels to be screwed over. Back in the hall, there's an uneasiness in the air. We also see the mysterious Sancta from before. It's revealed she is indeed Kaida's teacher, although it's unclear where she stands. But she seems to know about Kaida's condition as well. She somewhat knew something bad will happen, but stay to listen to her student's last performance. As for our protagonist, things are not looking good. They knew if they stop playing, the voice of terror will destroy this whole place and kills them all. Ebenholz was trying to take all the voices on his own and sacrifice himself. But Kaida steps forward to let the voices possess his body instead, sacrificing himself to let others live. Then the performance comes to an end with Kaida possessing all the voices. Because of this, the originium inside his body accelerates, and he can feel he will turn into something unimaginable. Aben takes Kaida outside, while Hibiscus and Cherney evacuate the people. In his last moment, he tells Aben to not let their past misfortunes define them, and instead to look fondly at their blessings. After saying that, Kaida wants Aben to give his all to defeat him. Soon Originium Crystal consumes his body, turning him into this monstrosity, resembling the Witch King. During the fight, Grandpa appears and tries to speak with Kaida, but Kaida can no longer recognize those around him. He attacks his grandpa, but Hibiscus manages to block the attack. And with a final shot, Aben manages to defeat Kaida. Shifting to Gertrude and Beagler. Gertrude can't believe Kaida went this far and actually saved the concert. Seeing enough, Beagler stabbed Gertrude from the back. And on her last breath, she curses all of Lithania. Back to Aben. The Originium crystal that engulfed Kaida's body had been shattered. But Kaida is already gone. Hibiscus tells Aben to step away, as Kaida's body will spread Originium particles. But Aben refused to listen, and takes Kaida somewhere isolated. He goes inside the hall to put Kaida's body in the lounge. Then he hears Kaida speaking, but he realizes it's the Witch King imitating Kaida's voice. Turns out Kaida's sacrifice was in vain. The voice of terror is still inside Aben's head. He warns the king he's not hesitate to blow his head off if he won't shut up. He then no longer hears a voice and takes Kaida to the lounge. He remembers Kaida wants to give Aben, and also receive something from Aben as a keepsake. Aben decided to take Kaida's cello, and place his flute beside Kaida's body, before sealing the door to the lounge from the outside. In the aftermath, the authority still didn't bother much with things in Afterglow. But Rhodes Island interference after the events made the authority can't no longer ignoring it. Soon, life goes back to normal in Afterglow. Ebenholz contracted oropathy and was sent to Rhodes Island along with Cherney, who will then choose to become a field operator. Hibiscus also goes back to the landship and receive a scolding from Lava. Because of the events, her oropathy has become more severe, but it's more or less stable now. Then we see Beagler confronts Grandpa. It's revealed it was Beagler underlings who informed Kaida about the concert and lure him to the city. But he did that to make Gertrude rush her plan, because God knows what that woman can do if she was given more time. Beagler then says Grandpa will be spared for his action, and invites Grandpa for a cup of coffee. Shifting to the landship, the doctor goes to the deck to deliver a message to Aben. Aben opens the envelope and reads the letter inside. Presumably it's a letter from the Golden Empress. She informed Aben that Kaida and Count Vertica have been claimed to be killed in the incident. There are even 2 death certificates and a passport by the name Ebenholz in the envelope. He is now officially known as Ebenholz. In other words, Aben finally got his freedom. But Aben didn't feel happy with this freedom. He burns the envelope and its content, takes Kaida's cello, and play the melody that he always humming. That should be all. Adios.